Hello. In this lesson, we're going to look at more advanced ways to hide and lock items. If you'd like to follow along, please go into the folder where you're keeping your sample files and go into Chapter 2 and open up the file named Mixed Up. Once the file opens, you'll notice we have a variety of different shapes. We have polysurfaces, we have surfaces, we have curves, we have polycurves, there's control points, and we even have some dimensions in there as well. So as I said, we're going to look at hiding and locking these different items. So the first thing we'll look at is just different ways to go ahead and hide objects. So for this, we're going to open up our visibility menu, and we'll keep this pulled over to the side since we'll be working on it. And you can see here we have a whole row of visibility icons, and followed by a row of lock/unlock icons. And we'll get into what each of these do in just a moment. So the first icon is hide objects. And we've looked at this before. You select whatever objects you'd like to hide, you click on this icon, and the objects hide. You can also press this icon, and if you look at the command line, it's asking us to select objects to hide, and then we can come through, select whatever objects it is we'd like to hide. We can drag boxes around them as well. And once we have everything we'd like to hide, we can hit enter, and we can hide them. Let me undo that. So let's go ahead and grab a few things. Remember, when we select, if we're dragging from the left to the right, anything that doesn't get completely encompassed by the box we're drawing does not get selected. However, if we're dragging from the right to the left, I'm going to hold down Shift to add some more to this. And if you'll notice, I'm not going to completely cover up this dimension line here and this line here, but because I'm dragging from the right to the left and I am touching them, they will be selected. And you can see it also selected portion up here as well. So now I have these objects selected. I'll go ahead and hit the hide icon, and now those parts are hidden. To bring them back, we can simply hit show objects, or we can right click on this icon here, and it'll do the same thing. I'll go ahead and click this icon for now, and that brings back everything that we've hidden. Let me undo that, so we'll hide those parts again. And now we're going to look at this icon here, and this is show selected objects. And when I click on this, you'll see the display changes. So the display has changed, and now what we're viewing in this viewport is actually everything that's hidden. So it's temporarily not showing us the parts that are unhidden, and all that we're seeing now are the parts that we've previously hidden. And this can be parts that we've hidden in one operation, or maybe over the course of time we've hidden a bunch of things. And by selecting on objects, again, we can choose curves, control points, surfaces, polysurfaces, dimensions. Anything that's selected when we hit enter will now unhide. So when I press enter to apply the command, you're going to see the display changes again, and it's going to show us all of the parts that are unhidden, including these new parts that we've selected to unhide. So now that's brought back all the parts that we selected and added them to the group of parts that was already still visible. And if I do show selected objects again, you'll see we can go back in here. Let me click on these. And I can also drag boxes to select here as well. When I have everything selected I'd like to unhide, I can hit enter and it'll bring back just those pieces. Then if I'd like to unhide or show all objects, remember I can right click on this icon or I can just click this icon. And the reason they do that is under your standard commands, you would just see this icon all the time. So rather than having to hold this down and go to this icon, I can just right click on this icon and that'll unhide everything that we've previously hidden. So there are a couple of other hide options here. The first one we'll look at is invert selection and hide objects. And this can be kind of handy. What this is anything we have selected, when we run this command, it's actually a script, and it's going to run the command, it's going to invert the selection, and then it's going to hide everything else. So let's go ahead and just click this. So you can see what it did was it flipped the selection so that everything else was selected, and then it ran a hide objects command and hid everything. Let me undo that. Let me pick a couple of different objects here. And I'll apply that command again, so it's going to invert the selection, remember, and hide everything else. And that can be really handy if you've got just a few things you want to work on and a very complex model that's going to be just too hard to grab all the individual parts. You can just select the parts you'd like and then hide all the objects. I can apply this command again to just those objects. Let me bring everything back. And I'm going to go ahead and hide some objects here. So I have those hidden. And our final command we'll look at for visibility is going to be the swap hidden and visible objects. So if I click this just to have a quick look at the hidden objects, you can see these objects are currently hidden. I'll hit escape to undo that. And now if I press this button, it's actually going to swap the objects that are hidden for the objects that are visible. So now we're actually in the real world working, and everything else, if I go to these show selected objects, it's showing us all of these objects as being the hidden objects here. I'll hit escape for that. And let me go ahead and do a show objects to bring everything back. Now locking objects works in a very similar manner. In fact, if I just go ahead and adjust this window a little bit, you'll see we really have the same icons. We have hide objects, lock objects, show objects, unlock objects. So really it's just sort of a mirror of the visibility icons, and they work in a very similar manner. I can go ahead and select several objects here, hit lock, and those objects lock. Now the color changes to dark gray to let us know that those objects are hidden, but we can look at how those display, and in a later chapter we will look at changing how those objects display. We can change the color of a locked object, and we can change the transparency of a locked object. And just like the hide objects command, we don't have to have the objects hidden to hide them. We can click the lock object, and the command line is now asking us to select objects to lock. And I can just go through here, choose different objects. When I have everything I want to lock, I can go ahead and lock them. I can press this button to unlock all objects. That unlocks everything. Let me undo that. And just like the hide objects, since the lock object icon is always visible on the toolbar, they have a shortcut where if I just right-click this icon, that'll unlock everything as well. Now I can drag boxes around certain objects. Hold down my shift key here and lock them. And now I can unlock selected objects. So when I click on this icon, the display is going to change and show me only those objects that are currently locked. And notice that it displays them in color. It does that so in case we need to pick things by color or do some other types of selections, then we can use our different selection commands to get just the objects we want. So when I have the objects I want to unlock, I just go ahead and hit enter. And now those objects, as you see, are unlocked, but it still left the other objects locked. As your models get more and more complex, it's very nice to lock objects. For one thing, you can't accidentally select them while you're working. And another thing that's very nice is even though they're locked, you can still use points on those locked objects. Now, if anytime you don't want to be able to snap to locked objects, maybe your model's too complex and it's getting in the way of things, you can go up to Tools, Object Snap, and you can deselect Snap to Lock Objects. Now when I go here, you can see I can snap to this line because it's not locked. I can snap to all of these parts, but I can no longer get a snap off of one of these parts. Let me go ahead and change that back. So under Object Snap, and check the box for snap to lock objects. And now I can go ahead and snap to my lock objects. Zoom out just a little bit here. So just like the visibility commands, I can also take objects and select them. And I can click this icon, which is Invert Selection and Lock Objects. So now when I click this, it's going to run a script. It's going to invert the selection, and then it's going to lock all the other objects. Again, I can run that command again. I can select this object and run that, and it's going to invert the selection and lock the objects. Let me undo that. And I also have a swap, locked, and unlocked objects. So we have these three items here that are unlocked. And if I run this command, it's going to swap them. These three are going to lock, and everything else will unlock. Now this looks a little different. As you can see, this turned purple, but there's actually two tubes here. If I delete this one, you can see the one that's underneath it is locked. And that's because there's a duplicate of this tube here. We're going to look at duplicate objects in an upcoming chapter. If I want to unlock everything, remember I can hit the unlock icon, or I can right-click on this icon here, and that unlocks everything. And that concludes our look at hiding and locking items.